Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Meeples Miniatures Miniature Review Show with me, Neil Shuck. Today we're going to be looking at a recent release from Warlord Games. This is from their Pike Shotte English Civil War range, and it's a box set of their Montrose Irish, which, rather unusually for some of their box sets, especially in the English Civil War range, is actually a full set of metal figures. And as you can see from the box art here, there are 24 figures in the pack for the Irish Brigade Infantry. So these figures are designed to model one of the Irish brigades that fought with the Marquis of Montrose for the Cavaliers against the Scottish Covenanter armies during the English Civil War. And I think you'll agree, just as a good start, some excellent box art on this particular set. So if you open the box up, you'll see what we now get is a familiar sort of layout. You get a plastic insert which contains all the metal figures. You get a set of plastic bases for all your figures. These are actually the same plastic bases that come in the plastic Civil War sets, so at least everything matches up base-wise. And finally, you also get a leaflet which contains both a unit history, some painting instructions, and also a set of flags. Let's have a quick look at the actual pamphlet itself, and you'll see here it's 2 or 3 pages of history, as I say, on the unit, some examples of painted miniatures, and also a bit of plot history on the Marquis of Montrose, and finally some hints on building a Montrose army. And also here, as you can see, examples of flags that you can actually cut out from the back of the pamphlet and use with your army. A nice touch there. It means that for those of us that are not particularly great at painting banners, you've actually got some nice painted banners available for you. Always something that's pretty useful. Onto the figures themselves, and they're basically divided into 3 sections. First off, we have the command section. Now here you see these figures, they really are warts and all. I've not cleaned them up at all. These are straight out of the box, so you see exactly what you get and how much clean up and what have you got to do. Here we have an ensign, an officer, a sergeant and a musician. And I think looking at these figures a bit closer here, you can see that generally they're pretty well sculpted. I especially like the officer. Fantastic facial features and very nice ruffled front. The ensign and the sergeant are fine. I'm a little bit disappointed with the drummer. Somewhat much more plain, and I don't think there's quite as much definition, especially if you compare, for example, the sash of the sergeant with the sash of the drummer. A little bit, well, I suppose for want of a better phrase, inconsistency with the sculpting style there. And if you look at the back, you'll see again some great details. The back of the drummer actually looks better than the front. Generally very nice models, but you can also see that there's a fair amount of cleaning up to do on these. Straightening out of swords, cleaning of run-offs, flash, etc. Not very much flash between the legs, which is always something you tend to expect, but lots of run-offs and links between bases and weapons and stuff to clean. So, yeah, there is a fair amount to do here. Nicely detailed figures all the same. Next off we come to the second set of miniatures you'll find in the pack, and that's the Musketeers. Now there are 16 of these in total. Basically what you'll find is that they are a selection from the range. There is a range of, I haven't counted them, but I think there's something like 11 or 12 different figures. And so you get a selection in the box. Here we see the first half. You've got a musketeer loading, one aiming and firing, and you've got 2 who are armed with rocks. Unusual sort of pose, I think, really. Not the sort of thing I'd particularly expect to find. But again, as you look at the backs, the detailing is fairly sharp, definition is well sculpted. Yeah, they're looking pretty good. And then as we move on, we have another set of musketeers. Here's another 5. Again, we have several stances: loading, aiming to fire, making ready, or even weapon assault. See the guy second from the right, actually is ready to have assault somebody with the butt of his musket. Again, we see the backs. Fairly well defined sculpting. Again, as I said previously, yeah, quite a bit of clean-up work to do as far as lots of run-offs and tags to clean up, several swords to straighten up, some of the musket barrels looking a little bit wonky. But other than that, you know, they're actually looking fairly clean. Now you'll notice I said there are 16 musketeers in the pack. You only see 9. That's because these are the 9 unique ones I have in the pack. There are actually 16, but some of them double up. So that's why you've only seen 9 different Musketeers in this particular pack. Moving on, the pack is completed by having 4 Pikemen. Now, the one thing I really liked about these 4 Pikemen was actually the fact that you get these rather nice brass pikes with them. Again, a couple of variations in pose. You've got a couple with the pikes at the ready, while a couple have the pikes more at rest. Again, there are various different variations. I think you actually have a choice of 4 different figures in each pose, and you get a variation of 2 of each. Again, pretty nice sculpted figures on the whole. The usual issues with the sculpting with the runoff between the base and the swords on those figures that have swords. So, some of the cleanup is going to be interesting. One thing with all of these figures, I think, is they all have very nicely sculpted features. And that's very apparent as you look through the entire range. And finally, as you look through here, we'll see some painted examples. Now, these are actually taken off of the Warlord site. You'll see some painted examples of the miniatures, and you'll see what they look like once they're completed. So, my final thoughts on these. As a figure set, they're looking pretty good. So, generally well sculpted and cast, a fair amount of variation of pose. There are some things that are noticeable where effectively you just got a head swap and maybe a very slight weapon movement between a couple of the options. But generally, you have a nice selection of different figures available to use in the unit, which will give you a nice variation. And for £28, which is how much the box set is for 24 metal figures, I think that shows pretty good value for money. My only reservation at this point would actually be as far as the actual contents of the miniatures are concerned. Most rules I've seen where it comes down to actually the composition of your units tend to go with representing your units as either half and half pike and musket or 2/3 to 1/3 one way or the other. Now, with the fact that this particular split, you have 16 muskets, 4 pikemen, and then the command squad, basically means that, well, all they're actually doing is giving you the option to say, right, okay, it's actually a 2/3 to 1/3 pike unit, but we're actually representing the pikes and replacing them with the command squad. So whilst the box set in itself is actually pretty good, I think its actual use in your army selection is just a little bit limited in that particular sense. And obviously, if you need to change your unit at all, what you have to do is then buy singles and swap them in and out. Yeah, you might need to purchase another 4 or even 8 pikemen. But as I say, on the whole, a very decent set. It's a good starting point for your Montrose army. Now, as with other Warlord Games products, they're available direct from the Warlord Games website, which is www.warlordgames.co.uk. Actually, they're pretty freely available these days from most online retailers. So if you're so inclined, getting a hold of these particular products is very easy. So that's the Montrose Irish from Warlord Games. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick look at this particular box set. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.